Hey, Richard Myers here. Hey, just by way of introduction, I probably have maybe 40 videos on my this little YouTube channel, and it's kind of fun. It's a way for me to get rid of, hand out, pass along lessons and things that I've learned over the years. I was an engineer initially, as most of you may know, and left my engineering career and went to seminary and basically was tutored, educated by Doctor of Theology men from Dallas Theological Seminary. I went to Western Conservative Baptist Seminary, but it was at a very special time in the life of that seminary, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. And so now, in my retirement years, I want to pass along. I want to empty out my file cabinet and pass along anything that I have that I think you might not be able to get from other sources. So I'm trying to fill in the gaps in some respects. And then, as you'll see in this video today, my responsibility is clarity, because I feel as though my gift or my calling is teaching. I love to discover, and much of it is just for my own enjoyment and love of the scriptures. And as I pass it along to you, my goal, my responsibility, my reason for being is to make it clear. And so that's my life's message in a sense. Now, in my audience, and you're listening to this probably on your phone, are people that I have ministered to over the years, were perhaps in the church where I was the pastor, and then there's some of you who are just family members that I see very occasionally at family gatherings of one kind or another, and then the third group that are people that have never that didn't know me before this YouTube channel, and you received this as somebody in the family or somebody in my sphere has shared it with you, and you decided it was something of value, so you're watching. So the first thing is there's about 40 videos. So if you only watch this one, there's a whole bunch more, and you should go back. And I tell my personal story and talk about discipleship and how's that to take place. And so what I have decided to do, I have an email list, and if you're on that list, then you receive email notifications when a new video is posted. But if you're not on that list and you want to get in touch with me, I'm going to post an email address below this video. It's called Pure GG, Pure GG, and it's a Proton, and I'll list it down below so that you can get it correctly. And so you can send requests or comments to me via email, and in this video today, I'm going to respond, and subsequent emails, I'm going to respond by sending you hard copy documents to back up the message that I'm bringing on this YouTube channel. So that's kind of a new thing. Again, if your email is already in my email notification list, you can just use my email address that's on that list. But if you're this has been shared by somebody and you've never heard of me before, you can contact me through Pure GG. And that email is listed below. Pure God's Grace, Pure GG. Okay, so today I'm wanting to, now this video is about the departure, and I've posted I don't know how many videos on the departure, and I've been focusing on this subject. And part of the reason is that our departure to receive to meet the Lord in the air is coming shortly. I think I hope within my lifetime that's left. And so in a way, that's why I focus so much on this subject. Then, of course, this is 2023, and we want to talk about the celebration of our pending departure that will be celebrated this year on September 17th. And so we kind of want to alert you to that fact. And then I've created in anticipation of that celebration, one of the things we do at the celebration is we confirm in our mind the biblical fact that our departure is imminent. and will happen before the tribulation and before the millennial reign of Christ. And so that's what's taking place. Now, what I'm going to do is go over the document that I intend to send to you if you request it. And this document is the fruit of a challenge, and that is to say, if you really understand something, you should be able to state it within a paragraph or two, or at least a page or two. And so this was my attempt to kind of put the final, close the door, so to speak, put the final argument that is irrefutable. And so if you'd like that document, now let's jump behind the screen. We'll talk about the document, and I'll come back and close out this video. As you know, I celebrate each year on the feast of Yom Teruah, our pending departure. And part of that celebration is a clear and irrefutable evidence that our departure is imminent, that the next event to take place when God steps into the scene will be the departure of the church in rapture. In other words, it's a pre-tribulation rapture, and there's irrefutable evidence, and it's really turning on one verse in the New Testament, and it's really turning on the grammar of one phrase. And so I want to present this. I have a 3-page document that I will send to you. If you'll just send me a brief email saying I'd like the departure, and I'll attach that to a return email and send it to you. And so those of you who want this document, it's 3 pages. I'm going to go over it briefly here. And what you're looking at on the screen right now is the cover page. And down at the bottom there in the gray is the verse that this entire pre-tribulational rapture hinges upon. And in the course of this, let's flip over to the 2nd page. And let me increase it just a little bit so that it's easier to read and with your phone. And the first phrase there, my responsibility as a teacher is clarity. And this is important, that as a teacher, my goal is to teach in such a way as it is clear. Now, if you understand something clearly, you're usually able to state the truth in a very small and concise paragraph or page or two. And that's what I've tried to do here. The pre-tribulational rapture is a closed issue because of 2 Thessalonians and the verse that we're going to deal with here. And I can't claim credit for this because it really was developed by Dr. Stanley Ellison in his book, 3 Worlds in Conflict. As you see there, I've quoted page 255, concerning the fact of the rapture. That is, the word rapture is from the Latin, and our departure, which is the English version. There is quite general agreement among those who take the Bible seriously. Now, this is a little bit confrontive. I thought it was a little bit out of character for Dr. Ellison, who was a very kind and gentle individual. But it is a serious question, and I think much depends on us understanding clearly, number one, that the rapture is a biblical reality, and number two, it'll take place before the tribulation unfolds. Now, in the following verses, what I've tried to do then is just dispel. You cannot be a biblical teacher and scholar to any degree if you deny the fact of the rapture or our departure. It is clearly taught in multiple verses in the New Testament. So the fact of the rapture cannot be questioned. And so the only question now, so I've taken 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 15 to 17. And I've noted up here the time that this epistle was written, AD 52. And this was early in Paul's writings. And so it's not something that was kind of tacked on later on or at the end, or it's obscure in any way. And I'm not going to read this verse. You can read it as it's on your screen. But it clearly states that there will be, we will be caught up, and that it's related to the trumpet of God. And then the next verse, let me just scroll up here a little bit. The next verse is 1 Corinthians 15, verses 51 and 52. And Paul wrote this in AD 56, just a little bit later. And he says, "Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. For the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised imperishable, and we shall be changed." And so the question of a rapture is closed. Let's just say that. Now the question is, when will our departure take place? And Paul now in AD 52, again, very early in his Second Thessalonians epistle, and he's writing here, "Now we request you, brethren, with regard to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and our gathering together to him." Clearly a reference to the rapture. He says, "that you may not be quickly shaken from your composure, or be disturbed either by a spirit or a message or a letter as if from us, to the effect that the day of the Lord has come." Now the day of the Lord is defined clearly as the tribulation and the 1,000-year millennial reign. And so this entire period is included in the day of the Lord. And so they were being deceived by a letter that the rapture was going to take place in the middle or after the day of the Lord, or after the tribulation. And then verse 3 is our verse. Let no one in any way deceive you, for it, that is the day of the Lord, will not come unless the departure comes first. Now I have changed the translation here. Almost entirely all translations that you can find translate this as a rebellion, or a great falling away. And this mistranslation, which started very early, probably in the 3rd century, by the church, is one of those errors introduced by the institutional church to protect some of its teachings. But clearly, as Dr. Ellison has clearly stated and supported with extensive documentation, is that the word apostasia. Now let's go down. The day of the Lord is that future period. Now I'm at the last. Let me just roll this up a little bit. The day of the Lord is that future period in which God will deal with the world in judgment. And it includes, of course, the Great Tribulation and the millennial reign of Christ. The departure, now asterisk, is a translation of the Greek apostasia, which basically means depart or departure. So now let's go over to the 3rd page. So the question is this a physical departure or a spiritual departure? And that was the exegetical, or the word study part of this interpretation. And the idea of a spiritual departure becomes the root for the English word rebellion. And that's where most translations see this. In fact, I think all translations see this as a spiritual departure or a rebellion. And but the problem is the definite article. From the context, this cannot be a spiritual departure, as has been assumed. It is not a departure, but rather the departure. This requires that the departure be something that Paul had previously presented to the Thessalonian believers. The definite article demands that this departure be our physical departure to meet the Lord in the cloud. And so the entirety of a pre-tribulational rapture turns on one verse, and in that verse, one word and the grammar related to that word, i.e. the definite article. So those who disagree must have, let me roll this up just a little bit. Those who disagree must have an explanation for the definite article. It is the departure and can only mean the rapture or our departure that Paul has written so much about in both of his epistles to the Thessalonian believers. 2 Thessalonians 2 chapter 2 verse 3 is a direct statement that the rapture is before the tribulation. One might wonder why the great majority of translations render apostasy as rebellion. There is some evidence that it began with amillennialism, which may have started with Augustine in the late 4th century. Amillennialism would not allow for the departure of the church, since the church was to bring in the rule of Christ on earth. And so that doctrine then, and let's continue reading here. I pray that those of you who believe this doctrine will see the truth. Wrong doctrine is not benign. An untold number of Jews were brutally killed on the basis of this doctrine. The Germans during the 1940s used this as a theological basis or excuse for mass murder of the Jews. In recognition of this verse and the truth that it settles, I celebrate our pending departure each year on the Feast of Trumpets, or Yom Teruah. This year, the celebration is scheduled for Sunday, September 17th, 2023. Now, down below, I've pictured Dr. Ellison's book that covers this subject to great detail. God, Satan, and man, three worlds in conflict. And I would recommend this book to you. And so I'm saying you have to deal with the definite article. And when you deal with it, I believe correctly, you must then come up with a pre-tribulational rapture, and we must now understand that our departure is imminent, and we can celebrate that fact on the Feast Day of Trumpets this year, September 17th. So this document is intended to provide, as part of that celebration of our pending departure, a clear understanding of what we are celebrating and why it is biblical. This 3-page piece is a little bit more confrontational than I'm typically comfortable with. But I'm taking off of two men who went before me. One is the Apostle Paul, and the other is Dr. Stanley Ellison. Now, by putting them in the same sentence, I don't mean to say that Dr. Ellison is inerrant, as Paul is. But even Dr. Ellison, who was a quiet, mild-mannered fellow and scholar, I was surprised in some of the confrontational language in his book. But what I wanted to relate to was Paul said, brethren, and this is 2 Thessalonians, with regard to our departure, I don't want you to be shaken, quickly shaken, or your composure would be disturbed. And so Paul was dealing with exactly the same issue in the Thessalonian church as we're talking about today, the time of the rapture. And false teachers and people masquerading as Paul and different teachers were coming into the fellowship, and the people were getting upset because they had been taught by Paul and through multiple messages and multiple teachings that the Lord was going to come and they would meet the Lord in the air and that they would be with him forever. The church in its rapture would be taken out of the way before the Great Tribulation and before the millennial reign of Christ, commonly known as the Day of the Lord. And the Day of the Lord is when God steps into history and takes direct control. He stopped delegating, he steps into history and wraps things up, as the prophet Daniel said. And so, based on this mild-mannered, wonderful believer, Dr. Ellison, and the Apostle Paul, who probably wasn't so mild-mannered, and their very firm and confrontation of this issue, I am, in retrospect, comfortable with the language that I've incorporated into this document. Now, I'll send this document out to you if you request it, puregg@protonmail.com. And so that email is listed below. Or if I have your email address, I'll just send you out a copy of this. Now, it's one element. This document is one element of the celebration of our pending departure to take place this year on September 17th. And, it's the blessed hope. It just is a wonderful prospect to anticipate as believers that we would be caught up in that twinkling of an eye, meet the Lord in the air, and that we'd be with him as the body of Christ forever. And so it's with that blessed hope, and it means so much to me at my age, that I just encourage you to not be shaken from your composure and to be certain, because, as I've said, the definite article, it hinges on the whole issue right there. Isn't that amazing? Grammar. Who would have thought? Hey, praise God. I thank you for your attention to this video. Again, let me know what you think. And we're looking forward to, and I'll be talking more about this. You can count on that.